You know about mops, not business. That phrase echoed in Addison Torres's mind like an open wound. No one knew that behind the simple uniform was a woman who spoke several languages and carried a secret powerful enough to change lives. Working quietly through the halls of a multimillion-dollar company, Addison cleaned the floors of the powerful, unaware that soon, her voice would save the very people who once looked down on her. Subscribe to the Fire Story channel and discover how far the strength of someone who's been humiliated, but never stopped believing, can go. At the headquarters of Dalton and Myers Global Trade, the glass floor reflected more than just light. It reflected power, vanity, and distance. Among the expensive suits and heels that echoed like bells of superiority, one woman went unnoticed. Addison Torres, the black janitor who polished everyone else's shine while her own was ignored. She arrived before sunrise, when the building was still asleep, and left long after the millionaires had gone home, leaving behind lipstick-stained cups and crumpled papers filled with corporate secrets. Addison was kind, but the world seemed deaf to kindness. No one noticed that beneath that simple green uniform was a woman with a story worth hearing. That morning, the air in the company felt colder than usual. The new CEO, Richard Hale, had arrived. Young, brilliant, arrogant. One of those men who talk while admiring their own reflection in the glass. Executives whispered, employees straightened their posture, and Addison, as always, remained invisible. As she emptied a trash can in one of the meeting rooms, she overheard a group of managers discussing an error in a financial report. With her sharp eye, one that had seen documents like these before, she spotted the mistake. She took a breath, gathered her courage, and stepped closer, still holding the cleaning rag in her hands. "Excuse me, sir," she began, her voice trembling but steady. "I think there's a wrong number in this balance sheet." Every head turned toward her like blades. Richard Hale, sitting at the head of the table, raised his eyebrows with disdain. The silence lasted long enough for Addison to wish the floor would swallow her whole. Then he spoke, a sentence that hit harder than a slap. "You know about mops, not business." Laughter filled the room. Addison lowered her head, trying to hide the wound that had just opened inside her. No one there imagined that this invisible woman carried within her a secret powerful enough to change destinies. Humiliation has a particular sound. It's not laughter or silence, it's the cruel mix of both. Addison walked out of the room with her face burning, her heart tight, and one question echoing in her mind. Why do people think someone's worth depends on their job title? In the hallway, her reflection on the glass showed a woman in uniform, but inside, there was a weary warrior. She knelt to clean a stain on the floor and thought, the floor is the same for everyone, some people just forget to look at it. While others bragged about their victories, Addison collected quiet lessons. She had learned, without even realizing it, that dignity is the last luxury of those who've lost everything. She knew every employee's name, remembered who drank their coffee without sugar, and who cried in the bathroom after a scolding. From where she stood, down below, she could see what the millionaires couldn't, the emptiness hidden behind success. Every step she took was a reminder that humility is the true language of greatness. One afternoon, as she polished the lobby floor, she overheard two directors mocking her. "I bet she never even finished high school. I doubt she can use a computer." Addison smiled faintly, a tired but peaceful smile. Little did they know she had once translated entire conferences, that she spoke 3 languages, and that she had once been a teacher. But at that moment, she chose silence. Sometimes, silence is the loudest scream a person can give. Day by day, Addison turned humiliation into resilience. She cleaned the same corridors where she had been insulted, but now with a strange sense of peace. It wasn't resignation, it was faith. She believed that God never wastes pain, He shapes it until it becomes purpose. Without knowing it, Addison was being prepared for something far greater than mops and buckets, something that would require not just courage but soul. There was something different about her. The security guards noticed her kindness, the interns sought her advice, and even the harshest manager occasionally watched her in silence, as if sensing that there was more to this woman than her uniform revealed. Addison held no resentment, she simply prayed quietly, asking for strength to keep smiling where others would have lost faith. Some days, she cried alone in the supply room, but once she wiped her tears, she returned to work with the same calm determination of someone who already knew. No one can humiliate a person who knows their own worth. Even wounded, Addison refused to harden her heart. When she saw the CEO pass by, she lowered her eyes out of respect, not fear. He, on the other hand, barely noticed her existence. He was too busy being admired, unaware that the woman he once despised would one day be the one to save his empire. Life has a way of serving poetic justice, and time, patient as it is, had already begun writing that lesson. That night, as she closed her bucket and turned off the lights, Addison looked at her reflection in the glass and whispered to herself, "One day, they'll hear my voice." It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. A promise made to destiny, silent yet filled with faith. And destiny, not far away, was already setting the stage for the next act. $1 million contract, a fake interpreter, and a golden opportunity to prove that true brilliance doesn't come from a suit, but from the soul. Addison Torres was a woman of silences. Long silences, the kind that speak louder than words. When others laughed at her, she simply smiled faintly, her gaze distant, as if she already knew that the world listens to those who shout but underestimates those who observe. What no one imagined was that behind that plain uniform and meaningless badge was a story woven with loss, courage, and faith. Addison carried a secret with her like a quiet shadow, a reminder of who she once was before life brought her to her knees. Before sweeping offices in Boston, she had lived under the hot sun of Recife, Brazil. There, Portuguese had become her second skin, and classrooms her first stage. Addison had been a language teacher, translator, and interpreter at international conferences. She knew how to talk to millionaires and children with the same grace. But life, unpredictable and harsh, took everything away: her job, her husband, her home. She came to the United States with a light suitcase and a heavy heart, hoping to start over where no one knew her. During her first months in Boston, she went hungry. She slept in shelters, took odd jobs, and watched her pride dissolve little by little, like soap in water. It was there, amid tears and despair, that she learned her greatest lesson. Humiliation is a kind of school that teaches without mercy. And from that school, Addison emerged stronger, even if the world only saw her as a janitor. Every scrub of the floor was a quiet act of resistance. Every drop of sweat, a silent testimony of survival. At Dalton and Myers, no one ever suspected her past. It was as if she had built a wall between who she'd been and who she had to become. Sometimes, while cleaning the conference room windows, she'd watch the executives gesture during meetings and remember the conferences she once translated. She'd even smile, not out of sadness, but acceptance. Addison knew she didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Her worth didn't depend on a golden badge, but on the quiet strength with which she faced other people's disdain. Still, there were days when the weight of her old life suffocated her. At night, alone in her small room, she would write words in Portuguese in a hidden notebook, prayers, memories, and phrases that held pieces of herself. "Don't let fear erase what I've already learned," she scribbled through quiet tears. That notebook was her refuge and her mirror, the only place where Addison didn't have to pretend to be invisible. Sometimes destiny seems to enjoy irony. Addison, who had once translated millionaire speeches about ethics and success, now had to endure the arrogance of the same kind of men, only this time without a microphone or applause. She watched in silence as the corporate elite repeated the same mistakes, the same vanity, unaware that each detail she noticed, each word she pretended not to understand, was slowly building towards something greater. God, patient as ever, was writing a story that would only make sense after the pain. Addison's secret was more than her fluency in languages, it was her ability to read people. She could interpret gestures, glances, and the intentions hidden behind polite words. She had learned that power corrupts, but it also reveals. And inside that building filled with money and masks, she saw how many of the so-called great were, in truth, small. What they called success, she saw as an expensive illusion. What they called authority, she recognized as fear in disguise. There was a curious contrast in Addison. Humility and greatness coexisted in her like two halves of the same heart. Her faith, born from pain, was what kept her standing. When she remembered the day Richard Hale humiliated her, she no longer felt anger, she felt purpose. "Maybe this is the lesson I need to learn before the next step," she whispered to herself. And even without knowing it, that next step was already on its way, in the form of a tense meeting and $1 million contract. One afternoon, while wiping down the CEO's glass desk, she came across a draft of a business proposal written in Portuguese. Addison's eyes scanned the page naturally, and a chill ran down her spine. Subtle errors, confusing terms, suspicious clauses, something wasn't right. She carefully folded the paper, placed it back where it was, and took a deep breath. Her intuition told her that detail might become important sooner than she thought. Her secret was beginning to intertwine with destiny. That night, as the building slept and the city lights shimmered outside, Addison looked toward the horizon and whispered in Portuguese, "Lord, if this is my moment, give me courage not to stay silent." And as if the universe had heard her, the CEO's phone rang the next morning with a new appointment, a meeting with Brazilian and Portuguese investors. It was there, in that seemingly ordinary meeting, that destiny would begin to unfold, one step at a time, until the truth finally spoke, with a janitor's voice. At 2:45 p.m., the air conditioning inside Dalton and Myers blew a different kind of cold, the kind that comes not from the vent, but from tension. The meeting room was spotless, its glass walls reflecting the Boston skyline. Water glasses lined up, papers neatly stacked, voices hurried and nervous. CEO Richard Hale adjusted his suit and the practiced smile he wore to impress millionaires. Outside, Addison Torres pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway, unaware that she was about to face the most defining moment of her life. The meeting had been anticipated for weeks. 2 Portuguese investors and a Brazilian businessman were coming to discuss a multi-million-dollar export deal worth $12 million. The executives were thrilled, and the new CEO saw it as his perfect chance to secure his name in the international market. But there was one problem: no one in the company spoke Portuguese. Overconfident, they had hired a translator at the last minute, recommended by a trusted contact. As usual, Addison entered the meeting room a few minutes early. She cleaned the glass table, replaced the flowers, and adjusted the air conditioning. She was about to leave when she heard Richard say, "Let her stay, in case we need something cleaned during the meeting." The comment came out in the same tone one might use to order water. Addison simply nodded, avoiding his gaze. Her green uniform seemed to scream against the room full of gray suits. She took a slow breath and quietly positioned herself near the door. The guests arrived right on time. Formal greetings, rehearsed smiles, quick handshakes. The interpreter, a middle-aged man with a thick accent, adjusted his headset and portable mic. "Gentlemen, let's begin," he said in English. Addison watched from the corner, pretending not to listen, but absorbing every word. Then something began to bother her. The translator's sentences didn't match what the investors were actually saying. The differences were small but intentional, subtle enough to twist the meaning. As the CEO spoke about figures and deadlines, the interpreter changed numbers, skipped clauses, and exaggerated promises. Addison frowned. She knew that language like she knew her own heartbeat. The Portuguese from the investors was clear and honest. The interpreter's English was anything but. A chill ran down her back. This wasn't a mistake, it was manipulation. The secret Addison had buried for years now burned inside her like a beacon. She tried to step away, but something held her there. Her heart pounded, and an inner voice whispered, "You were placed here for a reason." The interpreter kept pushing Richard to sign the contract quickly. "Trust me," he said with a sly grin. The CEO, unaware, was walking straight into a trap. Addison's stomach turned. It was like watching a fire through glass, seeing the danger and being unable to scream. Words started echoing in her mind: humiliation, lesson, faith. Everything she had lived through seemed to lead to this single moment. The laughter, the contempt, the silence, it all made sense now. Addison felt the weight of a truth ready to burst, burning in her chest. She watched the interpreter slide the contract toward the CEO and point. "Right here, Mr. Hale. Just formalities." Addison took a step forward. Her hands trembled, Sweat ran down her neck. She remembered the words she had written in her notebook the night before. Give me courage not to stay silent. Maybe this was the moment. But fear wrestled inside her. What if I'm wrong? What if it's just a misunderstanding? What if he laughs at me again, in front of everyone? The ghost of humiliation hung in the air, trying to silence what destiny was trying to make her say. The interpreter pressed on. Mr. Hale, please, we need to wrap this up. The investor's car is waiting. Richard nodded and reached for the pen. Addison's chest tightened. The words she'd just heard in Portuguese rang in her ears like an alarm. He doesn't understand anything. It's easy to fool him. Her blood ran cold. In an almost divine impulse, she took another step forward. Time seemed to slow. The hum of the air conditioner vanished, the voices faded. All she could hear was her heartbeat. She knew that once she spoke, her life would never be the same. She could lose her job, be humiliated again, or stop a disaster. Addison's gaze locked on the CEO, who was lifting the pen. She took a deep breath and, with a steady voice, broke the silence. Mr. Hale, I'm sorry, but what he's saying isn't what's written in the document. The air split in two. Heads turned. The interpreter froze. And in that instant, destiny began to shift. Slowly, but powerfully. Addison didn't know it yet, but she had just opened the door to truth. And with it, to the greatest turning point of her life. The silence that followed seemed alive. The ticking clock stopped, the air thickened, and for a moment, no one dared to breathe. Richard Hale held the pen midair, motionless, staring between the contract and the woman who had just interrupted the meeting. Addison stood firm, her hands trembling, her eyes unwavering. Repeat what you said, he demanded, his voice cold. Addison swallowed hard but didn't back down. What he's saying isn't what's written. Her words cut through the air like a blade. The interpreter laughed nervously. You must be mistaken, miss. You don't understand legal terms. But Addison stepped forward without hesitation. I understand Portuguese better than you think. Her tone was calm, but every word carried years of swallowed humiliation and forced silence. The investors exchanged surprised glances. One of them, the Brazilian, frowned and asked quietly, does she really understand what she's saying? Addison replied fluently, in his own language. The man nodded slowly, recognizing the truth. Richard Hale turned pale. What's going on here? He demanded, louder now. Addison explained clearly, translating word for word what she had heard. Each sentence revealed another piece of the fraud, altered clauses, doubled figures, false deadlines. The fake interpreter's face drained of color, sweat rolling down his temple. Lies, he shouted. But it was too late. The investors confirmed everything. The trap had been exposed. Chaos erupted in the room. Papers scattered, chairs scraped the floor. The interpreter tried to flee but was stopped by security. Richard, still stunned, stared at Addison as if seeing a ghost. You speak Portuguese, he murmured, disbelief in his voice. Addison took a deep breath. I do, and I listen, too. I hear what many pretend not to say. The simple, powerful sentence hung in the air like a verdict. The woman who once was mocked now stood as the pillar of truth. One of the Portuguese investors, deeply impressed, stood and shook her hand. If it weren't for you, this company would have lost millions. Addison lowered her eyes humbly. I just did what was right, sir. But inside, something had changed, a flame rekindled, a sense that her voice finally mattered. The silence that once imprisoned her was now setting her free. Every word spoken was a healing for the wounds humiliation had left behind. Richard tried to speak, but shame tangled his words. I treated you terribly, he stammered, and you saved my career. Addison looked at him with calm grace. Mr. Hale, we all make mistakes. Some learn from them. Others keep laughing at what they don't understand. Her words landed like a lesson, and without realizing it, he had just begun the hardest journey a man of power can take. The journey toward humility. In the hallways, the news spread like wildfire. The janitor had exposed a $1 million scam. Those who once mocked her now whispered her name with surprise and respect. Addison didn't gloat. She just sat on the emergency stair for a moment, took a deep breath, and let the tears fall. They were tears of relief, of quiet victory, of faith rewarded. Life was finally giving back what other people's pride had taken away. Later that night, when the building was empty, Richard appeared at the door. The arrogant look had given way to a mix of guilt and respect. "Addison, I owe you a lot." She gave a small smile. "You don't owe me anything, sir. Just learn to look differently at the people around you." He nodded, unable to meet her eyes for long. The lesson had been delivered, and like any good lesson, it hurt just enough to be unforgettable. That night, Addison went home with a light heart. Same uniform, same bus ride, but a different feeling. In the window's reflection, she saw a different woman, no longer invisible but whole. God used me again, she thought, with a shy smile. And this time, no one can pretend they didn't see it. Her secret was no longer a secret. It had become a testimony. And that moment would be remembered by everyone, even if many would never admit it. But destiny, generous and ironic, still had one last surprise. Because sometimes, after the storm, the harvest comes. And Addison, without knowing it, was about to receive something she'd never imagined. Public recognition and a chance to start over, not as a janitor, but as a symbol of courage and wisdom. The days after the meeting felt different. The building, once cold and distant, seemed to breathe a different kind of air, lighter, more human. In the corridors, the whispers stopped being laughter and turned into respect. Everyone knew what Addison had done, and even those who pretended not to care looked at her with a mix of shame and admiration. Conversations changed tone. Where there had been contempt, there was now curiosity, and in every glance that met hers, there was the silent acknowledgement of a lesson learned. Richard Hale, the CEO, spent nights without sleep. The humiliation he had once thrown at that woman now weighed on him like a burden. He kept replaying her words. Some learn. Others keep laughing at what they don't understand. They echoed inside him, cracking the armor of pride. A millionaire used to controlling everything now felt powerless before the greatness of a janitor. It was a painful paradox, and a freeing one. Addison, for her part, wasn't chasing glory. She still arrived early, cleaned the same corridors, and greeted everyone with the same quiet smile. But there was something new in her face, the peace of someone finally recognized, not for status, but for essence. She knew God had orchestrated everything, from the humiliation to the revelation. Faith, quiet and persistent, had done what no diploma or fortune could. It had turned shame into purpose. Days later, Richard called her into his office. She walked in wearing the same uniform, but he stood up when he saw her, a simple gesture, but symbolic. "Addison," he began, "our company owes you a lot." "I owe you a lot." She tried to downplay it, but he went on, "No, this isn't modesty. It's justice." Then he told her his decision. He would create a new department, international communications, and she would be the coordinator. Addison's eyes widened in disbelief. "Mr. Hale, I don't have an American diploma." He smiled. "You have something better. You have character." The news flowed through the company like a breath of fresh air. The invisible woman was now a symbol of integrity. The same corridor where she had been humiliated became a stage for applause. Colleagues who once looked away now approached to congratulate her. Some apologized, others asked for advice. Addison received it all with calm. "It wasn't luck," she said. "It was faith and courage." And deep down, she knew this was the reward for every tear shed in silence. In the main hall, Richard had a golden plaque installed, with thin, elegant letters. "Knowledge doesn't wear a uniform." The phrase caught everyone's eye. Many stopped to read it. Some smiled, others lowered their gaze. When Addison saw it for the first time, she touched the cool metal and felt a shiver. That plaque was more than a tribute, it was redemption. A reminder that the truest lesson doesn't come from the top, but from those who learned to look from below. That day, she was invited to speak at a brief meeting. Her voice trembled at first, but soon grew steady. "I didn't come to teach anyone anything," she said. "I came to show that even from humiliation, wisdom is born. Sometimes God hides us in the lowest places so that when He lifts us up, everyone knows it was Him." The room filled with applause. A few executives wiped away tears. Richard stood, openly drying his eyes. Later, alone on the company balcony, Addison looked out at the lights of Boston. They seemed like tiny stars compared to the vastness of what she felt. She thought of everything she had lived: Brazil, the cold, the loneliness, the pain, the faith. "Nothing was in vain," she murmured. The secret of her strength was simple: never let the world harden your heart. Every humiliation becomes a lesson, and every fall, a step up. When she came down to the lobby, a young intern approached her shyly. "Ms. Torres, thank you. You inspired me." Addison smiled. "Then promise me one thing," she said. "Promise you'll never let anyone tell you who you are. Find that out for yourself. God knows the right time to reveal it." The girl nodded, moved. Addison walked away slowly, her heart light, knowing that the truest victory is planting courage in someone else's heart. And as the sun set, turning the Dalton and Myers windows gold, Addison whispered to herself, "God lifted me from the floor to show that even a janitor can change a company's destiny." That was the end of one cycle, and the beginning of another. Because when faith leads the way, even the floor becomes an altar. If this story touched your heart, like the video, subscribe to the Fire Story channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because here, every story is a reminder that humility is the beginning of all greatness.